Yay, it's working. Hi, y'all. Happy Wednesday. I'm rolling over here. Let me get myself centered properly. The sun is out today here in the city. I'm so happy. I don't know where you all live. You'll have to let me know, but I'm in New York City and I was born in the UK. I was born in England, but you would not believe that. I used to have the most proper accent in the world. And then I moved to South Florida and grew up in South Florida and then spent 10 years in Los Angeles. And the reason I'm sharing this is I got so used to the sunny weather. And one of the things, I've now lived in New York City 11, 12 for a while. I think I'm coming up on my 11th year, 12th year. So I've gotten really used to it. I love having the seasons here. It's been really nice. And I think obviously a lot of metaphors for business and everything, not what our conversation is about today. But I have to say, this winter, maybe it just took me the 10, 11 years. Maybe last winter was the first winter. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm ready for winter to be over. I don't mind the cold. I actually like it better than the heat. And this spring in particular, we had like 70 degrees a couple of weeks ago, and it was like the 30s yesterday. So it's 40 today. It's not warm, but the sun is out. It feels like spring. I'm a happy camper. That's not what we're talking about today at all, but I, I feel like I'm like a sunflower or something. I like charge up from the sun. So I'm just a little extra animated. Got a good night's sleep and got some sun. I've got my coffee, so we're good for this conversation. We are going to talk today about why you might be feeling stuck at 5K to 10K to 15K months. Honestly, why you might be feeling stuck at any revenue month. I just know for a lot of my clients, that's where they'll often hit a little bit of an income ceiling, and why this might be happening even if you feel like you're doing everything right, and what to do if strategy isn't the problem. I'm actually going to kick off a 3-part series on income ceilings, and today we're going to talk really about understanding the difference between an upper limit, or if there's actually like just a normal problem happening in your business, and kind of how to navigate through that. It came up from a conversation we had last week where I was talking about my biggest income cash month in 9 years in business and kind of the upper limit that I worked through. And quite a few of you, thank you, by the way, I love when I get to hear from you, reach out to say how helpful that was and how normalizing that was. So this is a pickup from that, because I also realize that the conversation around upper limits can be quite confusing. Next week, and then this just made me think, this is just something that comes up for clients so much. I thought it'd be helpful for all of you. So next week we'll talk income ceilings and kind of income plateaus and some of the non-strategy reasons, so some of the mindset reasons you can hit an income ceiling. And then the following week we'll talk some of the strategy reasons you might be hitting an income ceiling, so that ideally after the next 3 weeks, we'll kind of have this series, you'll go through it, and you can use that to kind of self-diagnose and see what's going on in your business. If you're a client of mine, or if you've been hanging out with me for a while, you know I have it drilled in my head from my brilliant coach, Lacey Sites, how important it is to spot and solve the right problem, and how often I see my job as a coach for my clients is not, doesn't necessarily know all the answers, but is to help them find the right problem to solve, and how easy it is for us to create problems or latch onto the wrong problems, and how that will keep you at an income ceiling, or that will really sabotage business. So since I can't coach all of you, I'm hoping the next 3 weeks will help you to do a little bit of that diagnosis in your own business. And even if you're not hitting an income ceiling, if you're actively scaling, these I think are great things to be aware of, to know could come up for you. And so I think it'll be a great conversation. Before we dive in, because I always forget about this, I do have a coaching spot opening up. And I think this is actually great with upper limits to do a little bit of modeling here. I filled the intensive we had open this month. I filled the spot that opened up last week, but I had another spot unexpectedly open up. And the reason I want to preface this and share this with you, because I hope this will be normalizing, and then we can kind of bring this into the upper limit conversation. And like, is this a normal thing in business or an upper limit? And I also just think maybe it's helpful to hear these things and have them normalized, but also to have them modeled. And I want to be very mindful that I protect clients' confidentiality. So if I'm being a little vague, that's why. But I had another client who hit just a very personal thing with their family and with their kids that they needed to navigate, and needed to end their coaching contract early. So I have an unexpected spot that I kind of was expecting to have open up. So I do have a 6-month coaching partnership spot open. I'll drop a link for a free coaching consultation if that's something you're interested in. The reason I wanted to give some context there is I was actually chatting with my coach about it, and I was like, I don't feel good. I love this client. I don't necessarily want to let them go, but I was chatting through kind of how I navigated, and I said, I feel great about this, and I just want to check in, am I navigating this like the way I described this? Does it sound like I'm holding my boundaries, and still handling this with care? And something she reflected, and this will kick us into the upper limits conversation, I think, really well. And I think the difference between upper limit and is this a normal thing in business, and because I do know I can have one of my upper limits, or one of the patterns I can have is I can sometimes be a little too, oh, nice is the right word, but almost like too understanding at my own expense. And so that's kind of what I was checking in on. And what she reflected, and I think this is just maybe helpful to hear. She's like, I think this is just, it's just a timing thing. This happened with another client. Now it happened here. This is just such a normal thing in business if you run a one-on-one practice and you're not an asshole. And it sounds like such a funny thing to say, but I think that's just, that feels really true in this situation. I'm sure I could have bullied them more or whatever, whatever the thing is, but that doesn't feel good to me and how I want to work with my clients. And so I want to model that here and reflect that here as we go into this conversation about, is it an upper limit? Is it just a normal thing in business? How to discern the difference, how to understand that difference. I want to talk a little bit about what an upper limit actually is, why they hit the hardest when things are going well, how this shows up for me and my clients, and why that internal nervous system work sometimes is a strategy and it's as strategic as your offers in marketing. But kind of going back to this example I'm giving here, I want to model this because I was actually sharing this with one of my clients earlier this week, but just how normal this is. And this is just a part of having a one-on-one model. If you have a group program, right, your part of your model is going to be constantly launching and filling that. If you sell courses, right, every model just has something very normal in the marketing sales part of it. And especially if we're doing work where we actually care about our humans, which if you're here, I know that's the case. I think just normalizing that this stuff happens, and there's a really big difference. And then we'll kind of go into like what an upper limit is. And kind of that sabotage. There's a really big difference between something being a pattern and a problem and you not showing up to hold boundaries, or seeing a pattern where it's really a reflection of the work you're doing versus just normal stuff in business. And I think this is particularly important for us to have conversations around, because I think if we're not aware of it, we can really pendulum swing with how we respond to what shows up in our business. I think it would have been really easy, because I just had my biggest cash month ever, for me to say, oh my gosh, this is happening because I'm hitting an upper limit and I'm trying to self-sabotage. And I honestly am so grateful. I have a coach who's known me for so long that I've continued to invest and work. This is, a personal belief of mine, but I love long-term coaching relationships. I've worked with a lot of my clients for 5+ years at this point. Many clients long-term. Worked with my coach for 6.5 maybe years now, maybe 7, I know, for a very long time. One of the reasons is, she's brilliant. I love the work with my clients, but I just see how much better she gets to know me, how much better I get to know my clients. So I'm grateful that I could have someone in my corner, if this is helpful to know sometimes how to use coaching, so that I don't create a problem that doesn't exist. Because I think this is what happens so often when we're hitting income ceilings, or when we've just had our biggest win ever. It is really easy then, when we understand the concept of upper limiting, which I need to explain to you, to see something that happens that is very, very normal in business, that isn't a problem that you're not handling poorly, and to decide that that is a problem or that is an upper limit. And then if we decide that, and that's not what's really going on, to react instead of respond. So it would have been very easy for me to decide this is an upper limit and a problem I have and a pattern and something wrong. And I could have, I think reacted really, really poorly, instead of, or not being kind and graceful and understanding while still holding my boundaries in this situation, instead of, just navigating it. Not to pat myself on the back, but I think I navigated it with grace. And I also am fully confident in my business, and we have spots filled in June and July, and we have a spot that opened up, so it's really fun. I'll get to meet someone new. And so I just want to reflect that there, because if we don't understand this difference, again, it's very easy for us to react and to this is when I see people starting to sabotage their business. I'm going down a little bit of a rabbit hole though here. I want to explain what an upper limit is and is not, because I know not everybody understands that concept. I first heard this concept from Gay Hendricks, who wrote the book The Big Leap. I highly recommend. I feel like this should be like required business reading for everyone. And he talks about a couple of different things I'm really obsessed with. I really appreciate how he speaks about the difference between your zone of genius and your zone of confidence and your zone of excellence, which I know we've talked about before. He also talks quite a bit about the concept of an upper limit. And so if you haven't heard this before, what an upper limit essentially is all of us have an internal thermostat for what is normal, what feels good, what feels safe and familiar. And I'm describing this differently than he does, but this is my internal understanding from both 9 years in business, but also supporting clients with this so much. And essentially, we all have a thermostat in terms of how good we'll allow things to get, and honestly how shitty we'll allow things to get, that feel within our comfort zone, that feel normal, that feel safe and familiar to us. And generally speaking, when we can have, the rock bottom, so to say. We've all heard that concept, right? That's when we're going too far down past our thermostat. We hit rock bottom. Usually that's when we're like, oh, this is no longer feel safe. I need to make a change. And everybody has a different rock bottom. My rock bottom might be different than someone else's. But we also have you can't have an upper bottom, but an upper limit, right? That's why it's called upper limit. In terms of how good are we willing to allow things to be before it starts to feel really unfamiliar and really uncomfortable and outside of our comfort zone. And when we break past that upper limit, even if it's really great stuff and we're having really good things happen for us, or we're receiving great things, or you're great things in your relationship, great things with your kids, great things in your business, you're making lots of money, right? When we have a lot of great things happen, if that is past your thermostat of what you have been conditioned to familiarize as good, it will feel wildly uncomfortable in your nervous system. And your nervous system isn't going to be like, well, yay, all these great things are happening. It's just going to think, oh, this is so different than what's familiar. This feels really unsafe. And I talk about this so much, our brains are not designed for success. Our brains are designed for survival and procreation, right? It's our brains, our whole wiring, evolutionarily speaking, is so that we can stay safe, alive, make babies, keep the human race going on. That's like kind of like, we're just so basic at the end of the day. We're just humans. And that way we've evolved in modern day. But our modern day comforts and our modern day, the success we're all going after, consciously we can want that, but consciously is very different than subconsciously what's going on for us. And so all of us will have a different comfort zone. And comfort zone can be like, sometimes we talk about comfort zones in terms of going outside your comfort zone, in terms of like that stretchy action you're taking in your business or putting yourself out there, getting more visible. But our comfort zone is also with how much good we are able to receive, sit in, hold, and keep. And so for all of us, we have, and I was talking about this a little bit last week, and we'll piggyback on that here. For all of us, we just have a different internal thermostat in terms of how much good can we receive before it starts to feel wildly uncomfortable. And usually what happens is when it feels uncomfortable in our nervous system, it just no longer feels safe. And so some people call this self-sabotage then, right? Well, I mean, I use the term self-sabotage as well, but I don't really love that term. When we hit an upper limit and we are kind of past it on the other side, if it doesn't feel safe in our nervous system, we will often do things that look like sabotage to someone else, right? So that we can get back to homeostasis. So we can get back to what feels familiar and safe in our nervous system, in our comfort level. I think a reframe there is it's not so much that it's sabotage as much as it is our brains being really fucking smart and our bodies and our nervous system being really smart and just knowing this is what we need to feel safe, comfortable, and regulated. And so this is so important for us to understand, because a lot of times when we're hitting a revenue ceiling, 5 to 15K months, and you feel like you're doing everything right, you've got the right strategy, you've got the right offer, there's so much capacity, you're checking that like you really are doing the things right, but it just feels like every time you get close to hitting that or just going past that, you kind of go backwards. Sometimes it is because you are hitting an upper limit. Now, again, we're going to spend 3 live streams over the next 3 weeks talking about the mindset, essentially the upper limit, but the mindset reasons for this and the strategic reasons you could be hitting an income ceiling. So I don't want anyone walking away from this, since I'm not coaching everyone individually, to hear this and think, well, this means then that if you're having a hard time breaking past 5K months or 10K months or 15K months, you're hitting an upper limit. But I do want us to start to think about, could that be possible if strategically you're doing all of the things? And we'll talk about the upper limit piece a little bit more and kind of how to move through that. Because what I see I've definitely seen this for myself, and I've seen this for my clients. Sometimes it is a strategy thing. Sometimes it's also an offer thing. Sometimes it's a time thing. Sometimes we'll talk about the difference in terms of like when it's a real problem, not, which is why I wanted to open the conversation with what we were talking about here. Sometimes it's just a normal thing in business, but sometimes it really is that upper limit. And so when we're having an upper limit, I think, and let me know if you're having questions about this, because I know I think this is for some of my coaches, therapists, this might be a term you've heard a lot, and I know for some of you this might not be a term you've heard, so please feel free to ask me any questions around this. When we're having an upper limit, the way I think about it, and the way I think about this in terms of how do we understand if we're hitting an upper limit, or if this is a strategy thing, or if this is just a normal occurrence in business, using myself as the example, that's why I brought that example in earlier. I think it would have been really easy for me, like, oh my gosh, is this an upper limit challenge happening for me? I know, if this is helpful to hear, I know when I upper limit, so when all of us upper limit, generally when we are hitting that upper limit of like things feel almost uncomfortable that they're so good, we will usually have some sort of pattern to bring ourselves back down. And it looks different for everyone. I have clients who get sick, like they'll have their biggest cash month and then they'll get sick. I actually have a good friend. It's uncanny. We used to joke, she no longer works in the corporate world, but for a while she like broke into the corporate world. She was like climbing the ladder, crushing it. And every time she had a big win, it was like she got knocked with the biggest flu ever. That was her nervous system giving her, like trying to bring her back down to like, there's too much good happening at one time. I know for me, I have thankfully caught this and like love my husband for working through this with me. I don't do this anymore. I'm very mindful of this, but for a while my upper limit was when I would have a really big win in business and like business was going well. And then, I mean, some of y'all know my story. I've shared this before, but I had a 10-year relationship that ended quite dramatically with an addict and a whole bunch of drama that went on there. And you know, kind of picked my life up and moved over to New York City. So when all of a sudden business was going well, I'm in this like happy, beautiful relationship and marriage with someone who I think is a unicorn of a person. Finances are going well. I'm living in my dream apartment in New York. Right? It is definitely hitting my upper limit. One of my past patterns, I used to always pick a fight with my husband. It was just like, you could like clock it to the degree that he started. He had to be mindful of how he framed it, but he would be like, babe, are you upper limiting? I think is very, very cute. So you can use this as a tool as well to communicate if that's a pattern of yours. I know some people will do things like they will stop showing up for their business, or they will stop selling, or they will push away clients, or they will, like sometimes people do this within their business, or they will start complaining or start nitpicking things or start overworking. I know one of my if this is just helpful to hear, I know one of my patterns I have to be mindful of when things are really good. It is so hard for me just to sit in things being good and relatively easy, and to not like want to overly tinker with strategy and just, I mean, my strategy works. I've been fully booked for over 6 years with 20 to 25 clients. Like what I'm doing works. I'm really good at what I do. My clients make really great money. That is wildly uncomfortable sometimes. Like that can be an upper limit for me. And so sometimes I have to catch myself when I'm hitting an upper limit, especially when like all areas of my life are feeling really good. It is very easy for me to go and like want to tinker or overwork or create essentially work that doesn't need to be done. And I think a lot of my clients who, it's interesting. I have clients who fall kind of on either extreme. I think I have quite a few clients who come from this pattern, and I think there's also an element of doing that where it's almost sort of like feeling like we need to prove that we've earned our success as well. And so I have a couple clients who fall into that camp, or fall into like the over worrying or the like doomsday. Like they will find a way to yuck their own yum, so to say, where it's like, I am now just gonna like, everything is so great, but I'm just like so worried about the horrible thing that's going to happen in the future. And then I have the other camp of people where their pattern tends to be like, it's almost like too much for their nervous system to hold. So I mean, it's a fear response, right? They will shut down and just, again, stop showing up, stop selling, stop doing the things they know work, and pretend they don't know what's working, or pretend their strategy doesn't work, or pretend they don't understand what they need to do when they actually do, which is why coaching is so beneficial, right? Because sometimes we just need to be reminded of these things or to talk through these things. Because at the end of the day, when that's all showing up, if that's helpful to hear those examples and how that shows up for me and my clients. And again, this is going to hit the hardest when not just you're having success in business, but I find it's usually when lots of good things are happening in your life all at once. I know when I had my first six-figure year when my dad was sick, and the year he passed away. And then the following year I doubled and I had my first multi-six-figure year, but that was the year we had COVID and all lockdown. I didn't find I upper limited a lot then because this sounds awful, but for my nervous system, it was like okay and safe that business was doing so well because there was a lot of hard stuff in my personal life. I found the year after when I had my first, I think I hit 365K that year. And that was the year I think I got married. That was the year, I'd already grieved. I moved into my dream loft place in Dumbo in New York City. Like we had a lot of really good things happening. Business was going well. I think that's probably when I hit my first, maybe that's when I hit my first 40K cash month. No, it doesn't matter. But there was just a lot good, like a lot good going on. And I think that's probably when I first started noticing those upper limits. And so I think how to know if it's an upper limit or something normal in business, or just like actually a reason to get in, like you really are upset with your partner or you really are sick. What I find is it's often when there's a lot of good stuff happening at once, and there's a narrative in our, like, it either doesn't feel comfortable in our nervous system, and so I think it can be really helpful to check in with literally how do you feel in your nervous system holding this. I find for some of my clients it will actually feel uncomfortable in their bodies, or is there a narrative in terms of why it either doesn't feel safe or why you're not allowed to have this. I find it usually it is an upper limit versus something normal or problem in your business usually comes with things being very good, oftentimes in lots of areas, and discomfort, like discomfort in your nervous system or discomfort in your mind or a fear in your mind because things are so good. And so that's usually where it stems from, if that's a helpful way to discern, versus when there's actually no problem in your life or in your business, or a normal problem in your business, usually it will be much neutral. And so I'll explain what I mean by that. But so using the example of having a client spot open up for me, I think what was really helpful there is, I mean, it was just helpful for me to have, coaching support to check in there on myself. But I was able to check in. I'm like, oh, I'm actually feeling very, like, last month was such a win to me, not because of the slightly extra income, but I feel like I'm in a very big up level right now. I've been doing a lot of work between therapy and coaching, just on some of my patterns and upper limit and things like that. And so I feel like to everybody else, I probably feel exactly the same, but to my husband, I seem different. And to my coach, I was saying to both of them, I'm like, I feel like I'm a completely different person, and in the best way possible. And so, so with that last month, the reason that felt like such a celebration was less about the money and more about, I can just see that I really have up leveled. I really have changed. I've really worked through so many things. I'm really showing up, being different, operating different. And so then when certain things are, like when I had a bigger cash month, I'm so grateful for it. But the celebration there again was less about the money, more about who I'm being. And it felt quite regulated in my nervous system. It felt quite, normal. I talk about this with clients quite a bit, integrating your success, integrating the wins you make, really normalizing that so it doesn't feel so jacked up in your nervous system. And I think because I've probably been making consistent money and it wasn't a huge peak, but because I think I'd done all the work around receiving that and holding that and having that, it just felt, it felt normal and it felt very safe in my system, versus when it's an upper limit, like I think that would have even like been like overly exciting, or there just would have been a lot coming up. So similarly, when there's something then coming up on the other side, I know, oh, that's not because I'm like trying to sabotage or like bring myself back down or yuck my yum. I can see like this is just either actually a problem in business I need to solve, or this is just a normal thing that happens in business when you have a one-on-one practice and you're not an asshole, as my coach framed, right? And so, I reflect that here as a way to discern, because that's how I know that that's not an upper limit, because I wasn't so jacked up around the win. Like, yes, everything in my life is wonderful and I'm so grateful for that, but I've also done quite a bit of work to normalize that and to regulate that, as I have stretched my capacity, right? I've stretched my capacity to receive and to hold. And so this is something I talk about with clients a bit as well. And we talked about why internal growth and nervous system expansion are just as strategic as your offers and your funnel or your marketing strategy, and how that can support you to make, keep, and hold more money. Something I'm just seeing here. Okay, y'all don't have any questions. You're very quiet. Maybe you're taking notes. Let me know if you do have questions. Something I think about a lot, and I think it's so important for us to remember, and I'm trying to think if I want to frame this, because I want to make sure this comes the way I mean it. You know the saying where it's like you kind of get like the problems you're able to handle. I think it's the same with success. We tend to get the success we are able to have to hold a handle. And with that, I mean, I think we forget that more success, more money, in many ways it is normal, but it does come with more responsibility, with more, this is why I'm mindful of how I want to say this, because I don't want to create a story that's like, you should be scared if you're going to scale. You should be scaled if you're going to make more money. But part of the reason we have that upper limit as well, I believe, is there is, I think, a little bit of fear as well in terms of what it means to hold more success, more visibility, more money. And I think sometimes we also upper limit because that is scary to us, and we want to kind of get back to the more comfortable place. And so we're really boxing ourselves in a corner in terms of what we say we want. I want to make more than 5K months. I want to make more than 10K months. I want to make more than 15K months. But I want that without everything that comes with it. Refining my marketing, showing up bigger, being more vulnerable, having to deal with more clients, having to deal with haters in the comments, having to deal with paying more taxes, having to deal with team stuff, right? Whatever that is, it's like we kind of want, we say we want the thing without what comes with it. And so I think that will also cause an upper limit. All of it comes back down to what actually feels safe in our nervous system for us to receive, for us to have, for us to hold, for us to navigate. And in our mind, right? I think our mind is a part of our nervous system. Nervous system, I think more like somatically in terms of what we feel as opposed to what we think, but our brain is a part of our nervous system. It's all connected. So I think our thoughts are a very big part of that. And I think this is why we forget sometimes when we want to scale, when we want to break through an income limit. And I will talk next week about the very different non-strategic reasons we hit those income ceilings. I think we forget that our mindset work, our nervous system regulation, creating normalcy with success and the amount of money we're making, integrating new levels of success, creating safety around receiving, having, holding more is some of the most important work we do, because the truth is, and I know I'm repeating probably past conversations we've had, but your conscious mind and your subconscious mind are very, very connected, and 95% of your conscious action gets its start in your subconscious mind. And our brains love congruence, and I feel like that's a $10 word to say a very simple thing, which is basically that our brains want our reality, our experience to match what we subconsciously believe about ourselves, about basically our identity. We want congruence with who we see ourselves to be, what we believe to be safe, what is familiar. We want that to be congruent with our exterior result. And so if we subconsciously think it is not safe to make more than $15,000 per month, if we think people are going to come after us, if we think that that makes you bad, if you think that, oh, you're going to have to work a lot harder and prove to people how much you've earned it, if you think it's all going to go away, if you think you're not good enough, whatever, insert. If that doesn't feel normal and familiar to you, and therefore that feels really foreign and uncomfortable, there will be a lack of congruence, and that will make it really hard to make that amount of money, to break through that income ceiling, and to do so repeatedly. This is why, not always, we're going to talk about the mindset and the strategy reasons over the next 2 weeks. Sometimes it is strategic, but this is why sometimes you'll see someone will have a really big pop month and then kind of have a big dip. Sometimes it's because they've hit a big upper limit that felt so wildly uncomfortable. So they did everything possible to create congruence in their business and life. Yes, we could say that's self-sabotage, but I think we can be kinder to ourselves and to anybody who's going through a learning curve, and to see, like, sure, maybe that's self-sabotage, or maybe it is creating congruence and safety, but they will back down to what feels familiar and safe, because we want what feels familiar, safe, what feels like it matches our identity subconsciously to match in our exterior world. And so this is why, I was just talking about this with a client last week. I was like, you've got your strategy on lockdown. Like you can rinse and repeat this. Like this, sure, like we're always looking at data, we can always refine, but the number one lever for this client is their internal work and their mindset, because right now their internal thermostat does not match their external, what they're saying they want their external thermostat to be. There is such a lack of congruence there. And so it's going to feel like trudging through mud uphill and through snow and whatever the things parents used to say 25 years ago. It is going to feel like it is an uphill battle with the syphilis, I can't ever say the name, but with the ball rolling back down on us. It is going to feel like that over and over again when we have that lack of congruence. And when you can do the work to create safety in your nervous system, right, that expands your capacity to receive. That expands your capacity to not just receive, but to keep and to hold more money or more success or more clients. I mean, we talk about capacity in business so much. It's not just capacity on your calendar. I talk about 3 different types of capacity that I've now heard other people talk about as well, but that's a conversation for another time. But one of those types of capacity is that capacity in terms of your mindset, your nervous system, like what do you have the capacity to receive, to hold? And then I think mindset-wise as well, right? If we can start to do the work to create the identity and step into being, that's what I was celebrating last week. That's really what I'm celebrating. I mean, whatever I make is is somewhat out of my control with a revenue share model, but I know at the end of the day who I'm being matters so much, and that changes everything, because if I'm showing up to be different, right, then I have just stretched my upper limit so much. If I'm showing up to be different, then I'm also going to create something different, because I want my internal subconscious thermostat to match, right, to match the exterior world. And so if I'm now showing up to be different, if I create a different level of mind, as Joe Dispenza said, right, a higher level of mind. This is so a page out of Joe Dispenza's work. For those of you who love his work, he talks so much about we need to create a higher level of mind to create a different reality. I mean, this is getting a little in the woo, but I think Joe Dispenza's work is brilliant. And it's also quite based in science, in that this then becomes a strategy, right? We need the external strategy, but if it were just strategy and action, everybody who had the same business model and the same strategy would be getting the same results. Right now on Instagram, the trend is, right, using trending hooks and trending audios, and people are doing very similar things, and they're using ChatGPT. No shade on ChatGPT, but we're seeing like there's a lot of people doing similar things, and there are a lot of people getting very, very different results. Now, I think it's nuanced, because I think there's also a lot on the back end of strategy that we don't always see and we're not always aware of, and so take this as a nuanced conversation. But just as an example, that it is not, strategy is so important. I do not think you could just have a higher level of mind and a higher level of being, and then that is going to make you a 7-figure business owner. I think you also need to have a 7-figure business, and you need to know how to be a 7-figure CEO, and you need to have a 7-figure offer and 7-figure delivery and 7-figure strategy and a 7-figure team, right? I think there's a lot that goes into that, having supported multiple clients to that level. But if we just have a 7-figure offer, it is really tough to have a 7-figure offer bring in 7 figures without pushing it all away, having it all get burnt up in expenses, accidentally having a bunch of things happen to you externally, or bills show up, or getting sick, or being miserable, or to actually even reach that income level if we don't also have the 7-figure identity, that congruence in our nervous system, where we're saying, yeah, I'm someone who can make this. I've decided that, and it actually feels safe and familiar in my nervous system to hold. So I hope that example makes sense. Well, I'm just seeing if there was anything else I wanted to touch on through this. Okay. The last thing I wanted to say is why upper limits hit when things are going well, and how to move through them instead of shrinking back. That was I wanted to make sure I gave you something on that there. So I guess the last piece here, and then again we'll talk the next 2 weeks over what some of those common the mindset pieces. And I really, over the next couple of weeks, the next 3 weeks as we talk about this, I really want you to hear this conversation as not, this is what you're doing wrong. I think about this with my clients all the time as I'm coaching them. I think about this myself as I get coached. I get coached as well. Coaching can be confronting. It's not easy, right? It is asking us to have a mirror held up and to look at things. But what I want us to think about here is these are all opportunities for growth. These are all our growth edges. And so I want to highlight some of them so that you're able to spot and solve the right problem, what we were talking about at the beginning of the conversation, so that if what is keeping you hitting, stuck at 5 to 10K months, and you want to make 15 to 20K months, if you think I'm making this up, but if you think it's that you don't have a big enough audience and it's your offer, but really it's that you don't trust yourself, or that you're not, because you don't trust yourself, you're not showing up confidently or consistently enough, right? Or because you think that if you suddenly make all the money and have all the clients, you're going to be super overwhelmed and not have any free time in a life, right? We want to make sure we're solving the right problem, because otherwise it's really easy for all of us. We can't read the label from inside the jar. I can't spot the spinach in my own teeth, just like you can't. I can't put mascara on in the dark, right? All of those analogies there. It's just really easy for us to think we usually either latch onto the thing we have the hardest time with, or the thing that's most comfortable for us to solve, as opposed to identifying, oh, well, this is just my growth edge, right? It doesn't feel safe for me to make more, or this is the place I haven't been leaning into. If I do, this is what will help me move past that income level. And so one of the things I think about is, if it is an upper limit when things are going really well, the work there is integration. And again, I feel like it's one of those fuzzy coaching terms. It's sort of, I don't know, I feel like sometimes coaching terms are frustrating, but integration in terms of, I think we're so quick to want to jump to the next thing, or I think when we're in upper limit or something feels safe or uncomfortable, to almost want to minimize it. This is why I'm so big on celebration with clients, because we'll either want to like ignore it, minimize it, or just jump right onto the next thing. And I think the more we can do to integrate and to normalize, this is just my new normal, right? I think of it as titration, if you know that concept, where it's like a little bit at a time, like just stretching your capacity for what feels comfortable, what feels safe. It's a little bit, it's not quite the same thing as this, but if any of you are familiar with the concept of exposure therapy, with exposure therapy, the general idea is if, let's say you're scared of a tarantula, you're going to over time be exposed to different things, a different stimulus of a tarantula, so that you can see that this fear isn't as scary as it seems, and you can start to normalize it. You can kind of titrate and move through that fear, so that when you're then actually confronted with a tarantula, that fear is down. Tarantulas are scary, so I don't know that that's a fear I ever want to overcome, but using that as an example. With exposure therapy, what you don't do is someone who's like deathly scared of tarantulas, having nightmares all the time, is like freaking out. You don't take a bucket of tarantulas and dump it on their head and say, now you're exposed to them, integrate, normalize that, see you're safe and okay, because you will jack someone's nervous system up, right? I think we can all understand that. But what you probably would do is also not have them avoid the tarantulas forever and ever. It's very much Carl Jung's quote, until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our life, and we will call it fate. I think that's very much the idea here. So the idea with integration, the idea with exposure therapy, the idea with titrating something is to actually look at the thing we're scared of, is to actually look at and then start to normalize and to see that we are safe and okay. And I think we forget with good things, because it doesn't make sense to our brain, that would be something we are scared of, or that would be something that's an upper limit, or that would be something we're avoiding, or that would be something that we need to integrate and normalize and to essentially titrate to create normalcy around. I think we forget that. And so we don't do the work here, right? We will do, many of you know Carolyn Elliott's fear inventory. If you don't know it, you feel free to DM me. I have a write-up on it that I give to my clients. I'm happy to share it with you. It's essentially a mindset practice and exercise where you write down what you desire and then dump about 20 of your fears out, for exactly that quote, the Carl Jung quote, that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And then you can, rip them up, or you can see the fears are just fears, or you can write. I personally like to have the practice and write what I believe to be true, to kind of write new beliefs afterwards. Again, if you're interested in the exercise, you can message me or DM me, and I will. And if you're on the vault, you should be on my email list. If you're listening to this on the podcast version, just hit reply to the email, and I'll happily send that over to you. I have it in a Google Doc. But we do that so often with, like, I want to make the 5 to 15K. I want to break through 5 to 15K months. What are all the fears coming up? That would be a great exercise to do, but we don't always do it when we're actually starting to hit that upper limit, right? So if, let's say you're hitting 5K months and you just had a 6K month, we're so quick to either make that wrong, or to want to jump to, like, it needs to be 10K or it needs to be 15K, or to ignore it, right? As opposed to, this is actually, if that's kind of been your upper limit, like, that's your opportunity to practice the integration, the normalization. This is where celebration becomes so important, so you can help normalize it. But this is also where, with clients, like, how can we start to see, like, this is your new normal, this is safe, and what do you need to know, believe, or do to create safety around receiving more, having more, holding more? How can you make that right? How can you make that okay? How can you make that normal? How can you make that familiar? That becomes the work. And so I would just see that so basically leaning into, as opposed to shrinking back, because a lot of us, when we're hitting an upper limit, we want to shrink back. And one way of shrinking back is also, this isn't good enough, let me jump like 45 steps ahead. That is a way of shrinking back, because it's still a way of avoiding what we are currently sitting in, right? When we're currently sitting in something good, and we just want to future project why this isn't good enough, and we want something even bigger or better, that is a way of avoidance. That is a way of upper limiting. So we'll talk more about the mindset reasons next week, but that's what I really want you to think about in terms of how do you move through this. It is the integration, it is the normalization, it is practicing sitting in. This is some of the work I've done, is like, how can I just practice sitting in the uncomfortable feelings, and remembering that uncomfortable feelings are also the good things. This maybe sounds screwed up, but I have a lot of trauma, so it's maybe not screwed up. My people with trauma will get this. I'm actually pretty good at sitting in the uncomfortable hard feelings for, like, what we would consider negative bad stuff. I've got no problem with that. This sounds, I don't know if I should say this out loud, but I'm going to, because I just started. We do not think New York City is not safe. It is very safe. And my husband and I were walking through I'm sharing this to illustrate a story, but it sounds a little off track, but it's what we're talking about here. We were walking through the park 2 weekends ago, and there was like a mob of kids, and someone yelled, there had been a big fight. I kicked a knife out of the sidewalk. I had been like the nicest, bougiest area ever, so this is very unusual. So it was like maybe, I don't know, like 2 miles away from us in the park, and then someone yelled, he has a gun, and I'm not kidding, 100 or 200 people are running towards us. My husband like moves me over to the side, and like people are freaking out thinking that they're gonna die. And I was so calm. And I'm telling you this because that is because I have a lot of trauma. I have a lot of hypervigilance, but I also have a lot of calm and in chaos and in hard things. That is not where I have to do work to sit in the discomfort. Where I have to do work to sit in the discomfort, you have to imagine if that made me feel calm. And I was just like, well, I'm just going to figure this out. And like, I'm either going to get shot or not. This is so screwed up. I'm sorry I'm sharing this, but hopefully this is not triggering and will just be helpful for someone to hear. Where I have a lot of work to do though is how good am I willing to let things be? How good am I willing to let things feel? How much good can I expand into? That is wildly uncomfortable in my nervous system, which you can see. And so I want us to remember that because we talk a lot about how can you sit in that discomfort and stretching your tolerance for discomfort. For some of my clients, that's tolerance for being disappointed. For some of my clients, it's tolerance with the discomfort of being seen and not liked, or being seen and not getting a response, or whatever that is. For some of you, for many of you, it is also going to be sitting in the discomfort of really good things happening and stretching your tolerance, titrating, normalizing, creating that integration to stretch your capacity. Because that's, again, a different type of capacity. When you can stretch that capacity, you create a bigger pot, right? We have all heard the idea of like, as we grow and expand, as we become something different, it's like we're a little plant. Well, a plant will only grow to the size of the pot it's in, right? If this were a pot and I had a plant in here, I actually have a plant back there. That tree will stay about that size unless I plant it into a bigger pot. If it's now kind of hit the expansion of that pot, if I want it to be bigger, I need to plant it into a bigger pot. It needs more capacity to expand and to grow. It is the same for you and me. If we want to expand our capacity to receive, to break through those upper limits, if it is an upper limit and not just a normal thing that's happening in business, a normal problem, a normal challenge, a normal growth edge, a normal like time, results take time as well. So results taking time is not an upper limit. Let's be clear on that. We'll talk about that in the strategy version of this. Results take time. Growth takes time. It usually takes much longer than all of us want. Expectations not being met is not an upper limit. But if we have expanded to the pot we're in, like our job is to expand our capacity to receive so that we can put ourselves into a bigger pot essentially, because that is how we then can break through those upper limits, because then we have capacity to not just receive, but to hold and to keep and not push away more money, more clients, more success, more joy, all the good stuff. All right, y'all. I hope that this was helpful. Let me know if you're into this kind of a thing. I'm gonna hop off because I do have a client session in a couple of minutes. But if you have questions, pop them down below. Again, if you want the fear inventory exercise, I have a modified version of it. I've expanded upon it. I'm happy to share that Google document with you. You just have to reach out to me. And then please join me over the next 2 weeks where we will dive into the non-strategy reasons you might be hitting an income ceiling. And then the following week, we will talk through the non-mindset reasons, the strategy reasons you might be hitting an income ceiling, so you can do a little bit of self-coaching to understand what you need to focus on to hit that next milestone to scale your business in a way that feels really good, aligned, that's also sustainable, so you can keep making that money. Because I'm not interested in anybody being a one-hit wonder. I want to support you. I want to support my clients to make that consistent and profitable revenue. And if that's something you want support with, I love supporting clients with, yes, upper limits, but also the practical strategy, mapping out that well-oiled business so you know exactly what to show up for every day, every week, every month to bring in consistent leads, clients, and revenue, and then how to scale that so you can double, triple your revenue. I've been doing this for 9 years. I've helped so many clients scale to six, and seven figures. I'm really good at what I do. So I do have that one spot that opened up unexpectedly. I don't know after that, because I do have people who are already on wait lists who've put deposits down for June, July, I think August as well. So I don't know. I'm sure we'll have spots open up as clients come up for renewal, but I don't know how many more we'll have. So if you're interested in that, my spots do generally book up quickly. So I would invite you to book a free discovery call so we can connect, and I would love to meet you and see how I can support you to making 6 and 7 figures on your terms in a way that feels really good. All right, I love y'all. I will be back next week.